Hi there, my name is Dana Wiegand. My pronouns are she and they, and I am the digital archivist at Lambda Archives of San Diego, which is San Diego's LGBTQ Archives and Historical Society. So today we're just going to be talking about a brief introduction to Lambda Archives, some of our projects that we currently have going on, considerations when publishing materials for marginalized communities, and querying metadata. And then I also have a resource page with hyperlinks included so you can easily access them. So Lambda Archives of San Diego was founded by Jess Jessup, who was a local activist and community leader. He started Lambda Archives out of his apartment during the AIDS epidemic. So during the AIDS epidemic, a lot of gay men, gay activists were passing away due to the disease. And if their families did claim them, they would often throw away any evidence of their gay lives. There was a deep shame associated to it. So Jess wanted to ensure that these materials were not being lost, that their legacy was not being lost, and that the contributions of LGBTQ folks to our community at large were not lost. So he incorporated Lambda Archives in 1987, starting with a collection of materials he had rescued from gay men, some materials from the San Diego LGBT Center, which he helped found, and materials from a man named Doug Moore, who was highly involved with Pride efforts here. San Diego Lambda Archives of San Diego is now one of the best maintained collections of LGBTQ history in the country, and it houses one of the largest bisexual archives, the Fritz Klein Bisexual Archives, and a very large Pride collection, which actually ties into what we have been using Preservica for. So a little bit about our current projects. We have multiple oral history initiatives currently going on. One we are particularly proud of is the Trans Policing Disparities Project, which catalogs the disparities which trans individuals face when interacting with local police, ICE, and also other government agencies. We have quite a bit of digitization initiatives currently going on. For the past 4 years, we've been working on digitizing a lot of our materials through grants from the California State Library. And recently, we are digitizing our Blood Sisters collection. The Blood Sisters were a group of lesbians who organized blood drives on behalf of gay men during the AIDS epidemic through a grant from Cataloging California. We also offer paid internships to LGBTQ youth, and we provide curriculum based on LGBTQ local history for local schools and GSAs, which are gay straight alliances. So here's a little bit about why we chose Preservica. When I was going through different digital preservation platforms, I noticed that Preservica had one of the most user-friendly interfaces, and it really makes things easy. Um, so additionally, the ability to invite submissions allows for increased community interaction. Often our community members aren't sure how to provide their digital collections or if they can. So this is a feature that makes it really easy to go directly to the community and receive submissions that easily interface with our Preservica page. There's also the reasonable cost and the ability to upgrade for additional storage, which is important for us. So as a nonprofit archives, we rely quite a bit on grants and membership fees for funding. We needed a platform that was both cost effective and also had room to expand storage space as our digital collections grew. Open access to the collections is also a very important part of why we chose Preservica. As a community archives, it's important that our resources are not behind a paywall. We want our community to have ongoing cost-free access to their history. And the recent allowance of uploads up to 50 gigabytes that Aubrey just mentioned has been incredibly helpful when working with photograph collections from San Diego Pride. So essentially, every year we get all of the photographs that photographers working for San Diego Pride have taken at the festivals, at the parade, at all the different events throughout the year. And often those collections get larger than 50 gigabytes. So having that allowance to upload up to 50 has been pretty wonderful for me. So next we're going to talk about considerations when publishing materials from marginalized community. So in 2019, 2020, we saw quite a bit of protests in the United States against police violence. And one thing that members of those marginalized communities who were protesting really reinforced to us was that when taking photos of protests, it is not always best to publish photos which have people's faces in them, especially if they're in highly surveilled communities, because law enforcement can retroactively go through, find people's faces, and essentially we don't want our collections to lead to our community members being harmed. So that's one thing to really consider when you're publishing materials of protests or of events. One thing that we personally have to consider as an LGBTQ archives is it possible that publishing this photograph will out someone? Now, typically, if they're at a Pride festival, if there's a lot of crowd shots, we don't worry too much about that, just because there is somewhat of an understanding that you are in a publicly queer space, you recognize that there may be photos being taken, but if it's smaller community events, we usually use a bit more discretion. Another thing to be aware of is the person aware that the photo is being taken? And does the photo have potential to affect the subject's employment status? So you'll notice that one of these photos on this slide is highly censored. So during Pride festivals, people are a little more open about what they wear. And while at the time they may be okay with taking a photo, we don't know if later on they will consent to have that photo be uploaded as part of a historical record. So one thing we look for is there partial nudity? We won't publish those. Or do they potentially appear intoxicated? And that's an important consideration just because a lot of workplaces do monitor their employees' social medias. And if someone from someone's job were to see these photos, how would that affect their employment status? So that's just something we like to keep track of. On to querying metadata. So querying metadata is kind of a new concept, but the idea is to use terminology that the community being represented uses to describe themselves. So one way you can kind of fast track this is to consult with your local community members and community leaders. If you're unsure of community language or terminology, I think it's an important step in community building and long-lasting relationships as well. If you are representing a community in your collections, it is ideal that you would also be seeking out their opinions and just getting to know them, building a relationship. One resource that I personally love that has kind of a silly name is homosaurus.org. So Homosaurus is an international LGBTQ linked data vocabulary that is very inclusive. It has every term you could possibly imagine. And I've found that it's a great resource when building up our own internal metadata. Controlled vocabulary. It's also a good idea to contact LGBTQ archives or libraries and just ask about their metadata practices. There are a lot more LGBTQ archives and historical societies than I think most people realize. So getting in contact with them and building a relationship that way is also a great way to build up your metadata practices. So on the next page, I do have a resource page for you. Everything is hyperlinked, so you can check out our Preservica repository, our website, our Instagram, where we update regularly about local events that are happening. I've also linked our oral history collection, Homosaurus, and Archives for Black Lives Philadelphia's Anti-Racist Description Resources, which is an incredible document and very, very informative. I highly recommend you check it out. And thank you very much.